that's definitely one of the number one complaints that I hear from clients is, it's such a big barrier for them to get out the door in the morning to go for their run or in their sport, or that they just have to be super careful with their diet or they're eating a certain way because digestive issues are usually a complaint that you hear from so many athletes.
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty.
If you are loving the Eat More Carbs podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and review so other athletes can find us and follow along to get easy and simple sports nutrition tips.
Today we are sharing our episode with Erin Kenney. She's a dietitian, former athlete, and she specializes in gut health. Before we get into the podcast though, Reilly, what's your high and low?
My low this week is kind of a silly one, but this is something that you and I have talked about offline numerous times, and I think you're going to resonate with it. I was at Costco. I do a lot of my shopping at Costco. There's just so many great things that you can buy in bulk. And I was really excited because I usually eat Greek yogurt. That's like one of the foods I eat like on a consistent basis. And I usually eat that every single morning. I was so excited because they finally had like a Kirkland or a store brand Greek yogurt that's available. I usually eat 2% Greek yogurt, full fat Greek yogurt, because when I was struggling with my nutrition, one of the things that I always ate was non-fat Greek yogurt. I was so excited, saw a Greek yogurt at Costco, and I was like, yay, like now I can buy it in bulk because we go through so much of it between like Charlie and myself. And I did not read the label. I did not pay any attention, even though I'm a dietitian and I should. And I got this ginormous container of yogurt. I was pouring it out one morning. I was making my little yogurt bowl and I literally spit it like all over the counter because it was 0% fat. And I was so upset. And I know that you and I have talked about this, and I know that you can resonate because for some reason that 0% yogurt, it hits me in my soul a little bit, and I just am so upset.
Basically sour cream.
Yes.
Also, I just have to pause. I was a little bit rushed this morning. I just realized my shirt is on backwards.
And that might be my high. I didn't notice. That is officially my high. Now it is my high that your shirt is on backwards during this recording.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm just going to maneuver this around. If that's your high, that can totally be your high.
I had another high, but that is definitely my high. That is so funny.
Whew. All right. Well, she's right side now, so we're good.
That is great.
Oh,
okay, that's my high.
Okay. I was like trying to like not laugh while you were talking about your Greek yogurt because I just like looked at my picture and I was like, my shirt is on backwards.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even notice.
It's a Friday morning, so things are just off to a wild start.
What's your high and what's your low?
Mine is kind of the same story yet again. I went and I got my hair cut the other day, and the gal that cuts my hair here is phenomenal. She does such a good job. She's so meticulous. She's so gentle. Like when she like brushes my hair and everything, like she is so good. If you're in the Scottsdale area, DM me because I will send you her contact information. She's the best, hands down. But anyway, she's quite a bit younger than me. I know that. That's okay. But she's really chatty. We're chit-chatting as she's cutting my hair. And the salon that I go to likes to play a lot of like R&B, kind of some throwbacks. I think the salon owner might be closer in age to me, just based on the type of music that's being played. And all of a sudden this like older Drake song comes on, and the gal doing my hair is just like, oh my gosh, I love older Drake. Did you see he just put out this new thing on YouTube? And I was like, no, but my husband likes Drake a lot and he loves YouTube, so I should probably tell him about it. And she's like, yeah, it's so cool because there are old videos of like Drake and Rihanna. And I was like, oh yeah. And she was just like, yeah, I really wish we had lived to enjoy that era. And as I sat there, I realized that one, she mistakenly thinks that I am closer in age to her than I actually am. So that's my high. My low is that I realized that in 2009, when Drake and Rihanna were together, I was in high school and this girl was a toddler. And I did not have the heart to tell her to be like, oh yeah, I was listening to this when I was like learning to drive. So that's my low.
I have a client right now. I'm working with her and her mom, and she was born in 2014 when I graduated college.
And on that note, we hope you enjoy this episode with Erin Kenney. As always, if you have questions for Reilly and I, please find us on Instagram. Erin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jenna and Reilly. It's so great to be here.
We're so excited to talk with you today. Thank you again for being here. Before we jump into some of the questions about gut health, can you share a little bit about your background and your journey to becoming a dietitian?
Yeah, so a lot of my journey to becoming a dietitian was very selfish. And I think I hear this from a lot of other dietitians is oftentimes they'll go through their own health journeys and kind of gain some inspiration to maybe better their own health or help other people through that journey. And mine is very similar. So I had horrible digestive issues from day one, kind of skipping all the details in between that for the sake of time. I was also an athlete growing up, really enjoyed sports, struggled with my relationship with food at one point, struggled with mental health, all of the things, and really was kind of thrown into the conventional medicine route of, okay, you're missing your period. Here's some birth control. You have acid reflux. Here's acid reducing medication. And I eventually got to a point where it was just not getting better. Things were not getting better for me. And I was taking all these medications and I felt like I was not getting the true help that I needed to uncover the root cause of the different symptoms that I was having. And so I got to college and I thought, I don't really know what I want to do. I really like sports. And so I just picked nutrition as the route to go and selfishly wanted to learn how to take care of my own body, how to take care of my mental health, my gut health. And for the first time in my life, I learned that a holistic approach was really the best way for my personal self to get better. And after experiencing that journey, I was just kind of like lit up of, wow, like other people are struggling with these same things. I didn't get the help that I needed and people need to know this information. And the power of nutrition was so powerful in my own journey. It played such an integral role into my healing, not only mentally, but physically. And that's kind of what brought me here today.
I think we hear so often athletes talk about gut health being a concern for them. Is that something that you see a lot of, is both that sports side of things being that is part of your background and also work very closely with like gut health?
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of the athletes that I work with, mostly endurance athletes here in the Boston area, that's definitely one of the number one complaints that I hear from clients is, it's such a big barrier for them to get out the door in the morning to go for their run or in their sport, or that they just have to be super careful with their diet or they're eating a certain way because digestive issues are usually a complaint that you hear from so many athletes. It makes me so sad because, as you both know, fueling is so important. And when you have digestive issues, it can be such a struggle to know how to properly fuel, know when to properly fuel, or even understand that some of the symptoms that you're experiencing, there's root causes that are underlying that can be addressed nutritionally to make you feel better and then therefore perform better in sport, because the gut is connected to everything, right? It's going to impact your mood, your motivation to perform in that sport. It's going to impact your immune function, your ability to recover faster. So we all should care about it and prioritize it. But I think so many people with gut health, they're just like, oh, I've been living this way for so many years. This is just how I am. It's something that we should not just sit back and accept.
Before I ask you a million questions about gut health for athletes, I feel like gut health is kind of like a catch-all term right now. I feel like there's a lot of people saying that on the internet. So do you mind maybe defining that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really helpful to understand what we mean by gut health, because I will say that I feel like the wellness industry, and that could be in air quotations, wellness industry, right? A lot of people talk about gut health in the sense of maybe like bloating or aesthetics in terms of how their belly looks, or even it somehow turns into weight loss and diet culture. But when we talk about the gut microbiome or the gut microbiota here in this setting, we're really talking about the gut microbiota, which is the collection of microorganisms, which includes bacteria, archaea, fungi, viruses that are in the gut. And when we talk about gut, we're not talking about the stomach. We can include the stomach when we're talking about gut health, but when we're talking about the gut, we're really referring to the lower part of the intestine, so the small and the large intestine, which is really where the majority of bacteria, archaea, fungi reside in our digestive tract. And then the gut microbiome, different from the gut microbiota, is the collection of genetic information within the microbiota that provides information about which microorganisms are present, as well as the functional capacity of this ecosystem, which I like to describe similar to like a forest. When we think of the gut, it's, we've got different species in there that are maybe positive and maybe that are not so positive, but they kind of exist in this realm similar to a forest that people can think of, which might be helpful in the context as we continue to talk about it.
You mentioned already that a lot of athletes will say to you, this is just how I am. For someone listening to the podcast that might be experiencing some type of gut dysfunction, what would be some things that fall into that category as like maybe what we would think of as like not normal gut function?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely starting with the frequency at which they're going to the bathroom, which could be, most people should be at least eliminating once a day. So if individuals are going multiple days without having a bowel movement, if they're actually going quite frequently, so multiple times a day, and the consistency is maybe looser, we want a nice firm stool. We want a firm stool. We want it to be painless. We don't want it to be accompanied by lots of gas or discomfort. So those are some things to keep in mind. Bloating, excessive bloating, when we talk about gas, and as you're already probably realizing, there's no such thing as TMI with gut health, and we have to talk about these things. With the aspect of gas, I talk to clients, and if they're saying, having gas is normal, it's part of healthy digestion. But if you're having gas that's clearing your room regularly, that's a sign that something's probably off. And then outside of those, aspects of just the frequency, the consistency, the symptoms that accompany it, there are also signs of gut dysfunction, which might be, food sensitivities that you're finding that, oh, all of a sudden I can't eat oatmeal or I can't eat broccoli. These newfound food aversions that might come up could be a sign that something has gone wrong in the gut. And then it also shows up as skin issues, brain fog, which that can mean many different things. So it's kind of a little bit more nuanced, but there are other symptoms that can indicate gut imbalances other than just your kind of day-to-day bloating, constipation, diarrhea type stuff.
What role does nutrition play in helping manage that?
A very large role. I love the name of your podcast, by the way. I think it's very fitting, especially for this kind of opening of the answer to this question. And the number one thing that nutrition will play a role in, and the number one thing that comes up in my practice, is just getting enough energy in order to support fueling. As you both know, you talk about this in the context all the time of fueling for optimal energy and hormone balance, but we often forget that our gut is one of those organs that needs energy, and it needs energy for repair, just like your biceps, just like your calf muscles need. And if you are not eating enough calories, if you're under fueling, whether it's carbohydrates, proteins, fats, then your gut is going to take a hit. It's not going to function optimally. It's not going to receive oxygen and blood flow and repair that it needs. Our gut turnover is every 3 to 5 days. So if you're not eating enough as an athlete, you're shortchanging your gut health just simply that way. So that's kind of high level. When we get into more of the nuances of nutrition, we can talk about zinc. Zinc is an essential nutrient that's important for the gut lining. Protein is essential for the gut lining as well, maintaining that nice healthy integrity to keep things in the gut that should stay in the gut to prevent what we call leaky gut. Fiber rich foods, so things like fruits and vegetables and whole grains, those all help to fuel the bacteria that live in the gut. Those are typically what we call prebiotics. So prebiotics are the fiber rich foods found in fruits, vegetables, whole grains that help to keep those bacteria alive. And those bacteria are what are controlling our immune system, supporting our mood, reducing inflammation. Fiber, polyphenol rich foods, so lots of color, things like fruits, especially berries, those help us to reduce inflammation in the gut. Things like magnesium, electrolytes, they all impact the motility. Motility is just, we're talking about the movement of the intestines. So whether things are moving too slow or too fast, if you're not getting enough potassium or sodium, which is particularly important as athletes, right? We have higher needs for those types of things, then that can impact the motility. It can impact the way that our stomach acid is functioning. So those are just a few. I could go on and on and on. Fermented foods, right? So those are going to be the probiotics. So we talked about the prebiotics with the fiber-rich foods, the probiotic-rich foods. So things like fermented foods. We're talking kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt contains probiotics. These foods help to kind of replenish those beneficial bacteria, which plays a large role in optimizing our digestive health.
When it comes to some of those foods that you just mentioned, as far as your fermented foods, your pre and your probiotics, we see a lot of marketed things that are pill or capsule form of pre and probiotics. So how do you help athletes integrate some of those foods from a whole food source into their complicated schedules already as athletes?
Yep. I think the easiest ones that tend to be well tolerated by clients are the dairy product fermented foods. So things like the yogurt, kefir, simply having yogurt with granola for a snack snack, or making a smoothie with kefir. In terms of the ferments, such as things like, if you did fermented beets or carrots, even the pickles, they have fermented pickles. Sometimes I just tell clients, take a spoonful of it at the end of the day, right before dinner, treat it like a supplement, but it's a whole food, cheaper alternative. Just take a spoonful of it. That's what my husband and I do. Or you could put it on a taco, or you could put it on a burger. Those are just a few options. Some of the probiotic rich foods that are fermented, they're often heated in traditional cooking. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're looking to incorporate fermented foods. When you heat those foods, you do kill off a lot of those beneficial bacteria. So those would be things like miso that are typically added to a soup, or tempeh that we typically would cook. Those, you're not going to get the same benefits as something like a kefir that's hopefully not heated in that smoothie. And so the dairy products tend to be the easiest ones, or I would say a lot of people will kind of take my recommendation on the, taking a spoonful of the, sauerkraut or kimchi or fermented vegetable types.
There's so much that gut health kind of impacts, but one of the things that we're talking a lot with athletes about is hydration, and hydration can potentially impact gut movement and things like that. Can you talk about that relationship, especially from an athletic standpoint where hydration needs might be higher than the general population?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hydration is absolutely vital for maintaining gut health. I tell clients this all the time because even non-athletes, right? I feel like everyone struggles with hydration, or at least has a hard time with consistency. And hydration is so important for ensuring that our digestive system functions properly. It helps to absorb nutrients in the gut. So if you're dehydrated, right, you're not going to absorb the nutrients from the foods that you're eating as well. It basically is going to lubricate the tissue in the digestive tract, which is very important for supporting inflammation, keeping those beneficial bacteria alive, right? Because that's their environment, and they need it to be one that is hydrated environment. It can cause constipation, right? If you struggle with constipation, it's uncomfortable. It can lead to worse bloating. And then, as an athlete, if you're trying to perform in sport and you're constipated, it's not a good feeling, right? You're going to feel more sluggish and tired. It's also going to impact your electrolyte balance. So I mentioned how electrolytes play a vital role in motility, also in nutrient absorption and stomach acid. And so if you're not drinking enough, which typically means you're probably not getting those electrolytes, because typically as athletes, a lot of us will be adding in electrolytes into our routine, then, we're going to shortchange a lot of those just daily functions that happen for digestion. So you're more likely to experience constipation, more likely to experience diarrhea, issues with motility or peristalsis, again, that movement of digestion. So things just aren't going to move the way that they should. It tends to be the number one goal that I work with when I work with clients, of like, that is foundational to everything that you're doing, including gut health as an athlete.
I think that there are so many things that any athlete listening to this could take away as far as wanting to implement some things, but what would be some of your top tips for an athlete to take and implement right away as far as a starting point to work towards that normal functioning gut, that overall gut health?
I think number one would be make sure you're eating enough, make sure that you're properly fueling. Like I said, one of the number one things that I see athletes doing is under fueling and having digestive issues as a result of that. So number one, work with a dietitian. You've got wonderful dietitians already here that can support you. That's number one. You need to be getting enough fuel. Number two, I would say diversity is so key. A lot of the times with my endurance athletes, it's like oatmeal, peanut butter, banana. They're eating the same thing for breakfast every day, and then lunch is, like a sandwich with turkey and Cape Cod chips. And so we need more color. We need more diversity. We need, fermented foods and prebiotic rich foods. We need color in our diets, because that's really what we know from the research is going to support optimal health is diversity. And so if we're eating diversity in our diet, then that's going to transfer into diversity in the bacteria that live in our gut. Not to mention the bacteria thrive off of that fiber, and keeping those bacteria alive helps to keep that gut lining nice and strong, which prevents that, what we call leaky gut. So properly fueling, getting enough total energy, including your macronutrients, right? Your proteins, your fats, your carbs. Number two, diversity, color. And then number three, I would say, nervous system is a huge part of digestive issues that I see in my practice. And what I mean by this is the way that you're eating or your relationship with food. We live in a busy world, right? A distracted world, a busy world, a stressful world, and stress has a big impact on our gut health. When we're stressed, our bodies go into that fight or flight mode. Our bodies don't really know the difference between being chased by a tiger and we saw something on social media that triggered us. And so when you are eating, your body really wants to be in that rest and digest mode for optimal absorption, for optimal motility, even the way you react to that food, right? You can actually create a response to a food just because of the state of your nervous system, because you're stressed, because you're anxious or distracted or rushing. So slow down when you eat, chew your food to applesauce consistency, really try to be present with food, because the way that you eat is also just as important as what you eat.
I'm so glad you brought up like that brain and gut connection. I think that there's a lot out there that talks about that, but can you talk specifically about how that like actually works?
There's two main mechanisms as to how we talk about the gut brain connection. So the first one is a physical connection, and that is the physical connection of our brain to our gut via the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is one of the largest nerves, cranial nerves in our body. It innervates almost every organ in our body. So you can kind of think of it like starting at the brain, and then it's got these little finger-like projections that touch all of our organs, including our digestive system. So I like to talk about it in terms of a walkie-talkie. If your brain is feeling a certain way, if you're feeling anxious up here, it's going to send that walkie-talkie signal down to your gut and say, ooh, we're stressed, we're irritated. And that can cause inflammation, that can create movement, not in a good way, like diarrhea or even constipation. So there's this physical connection that we have lots of research to support any imbalance related to this vagal nerve dysfunction, is what we call it. The second connection is not a physical connection per se, but a connection via certain hormones and neurotransmitters. So there are neurotransmitters, right, that are produced in the body, things like serotonin and dopamine. And when these are produced in the body, they have a direct impact on our gut health. In fact, there's a great amount of research linking, symptoms like IBS to low serotonin or serotonin dysfunction in certain individuals. And so it's important to keep in mind that we have that hormonal aspect as well that is also going to connect our gut and our brain, because those hormones have an effect on both of these major organs.
A lot of times with athletes, they get really nervous before like a game, a race, or something like that. Is this the same system or pathway that might cause like that feeling of needing to use the restroom before an event, like that nervous stomach that some people might experience?
Yes, absolutely. And this was 100% me when I was younger. I remember I would always skip eating before my soccer games because I was always just so anxious. I couldn't fathom the idea of stomaching something, and now I know better and the importance of fueling before. But yeah, of course, that stress that you experience before any sort of endurance event or anything at all can signal, when you have epinephrine and adrenaline that are going through the body, those are going to also have an impact on our gut health. And like you said, can cause us to have, things like diarrhea occur.
Are there certain foods or food groups that you recommend for like that almost nervous stomach that people get? Or is it kind of working through, oh my gosh, Reilly and I joke about this all the time, that this podcast should be called It Depends, because it depends from person to person. But is there something specific, or does it depend from athlete to athlete?
Yeah, there's definitely some general guidelines to consider if you are someone who struggles with that. In general, it's good to keep those kind of basic principles of what we want to eat before a workout. I know both of you talk about these types of strategies of like, you don't want something super high in fiber, you don't want something super high in fat, especially the closer you get to a workout, because that is not going to be optimal for digestion. And so those kind of same principles apply. But then there's also things to consider of easily digestible is going to be kind of across the board good for both of those scenarios. Maybe a bowl of oatmeal, maybe even lower FODMAP foods for certain individuals. So it's kind of like a situational low FODMAP recommendation where they don't need to be low FODMAP for the entire day, but maybe before they go out and exercise, they would choose, not an apple pre-workout, but maybe something that's low FODMAP like oatmeal that's going to be easier to digest, knowing that they're going to have, that kind of like irritated gut before they do that type of exercise. So low FODMAP options are typically things that we might talk about, in our practice. Other things that could be helpful to keep in mind would be caffeine, right? If you're already someone who's super anxious, you want to make sure you're looking at what types of things are in your electrolyte blends. Is there caffeine in there? Are you drinking caffeine on an empty stomach? There's tons of different gels and goos out there now that have caffeine added to them. And if you're an anxious person, this is not the good choice for you, because that's definitely going to exacerbate those digestive symptoms. But other than that, I would say yes, the it depends answer is definitely a good one, because, we all are so different and individualized, but, bland whole-blend foods, easy to digest, maybe considering low FODMAP, cutting the caffeine, understanding your triggers, right? Lactose can be a big one. So doing like liquid milk, for example, might just not be the best fit for you. So keeping like a little bit of a food symptom journal might be helpful to identify foods that in those situations are going to be your go-to.
For anyone listening who's not familiar with the term FODMAP, can you define that and share a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so the FODMAPs, they are basically an acronym that stands for a group of different types of carbohydrates. I don't know them all off the top of my head at this very moment, but if you look them up, they're basically multiple different classes of these types of carbohydrates. And based on the research that we have, they are carbohydrates that are typically poorly absorbed. And if you have symptoms like, IBS type symptoms, or we'll call it like a nervous stomach pre-exercise, then these are foods that, because they're poorly digested, are going to not be the best choice for you if you're looking to improve symptom management.
So it sounds like when we're talking about gut health, especially for athletes or maybe just someone who's not an athlete too, everything is very individualized, but there are a lot of things that you can work with clients and athletes on to help them manage that and make sure that they're still fueling properly and managing maybe those sometimes not so great symptoms that we think of associated with gut health.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some times where, people are just eating things that have ingredients in them like artificial sweeteners or sugar alcohols. And sometimes it's just identifying those ingredients and understanding, that those ingredients were really causing them to have those digestive symptoms. And sometimes it's a really quick fix. And sometimes it's, more of a journey where they've been dealing with, underlying imbalances for a while. Maybe they do have things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or, maybe they do have something like a parasite. And there does need to be more long-term attention that isn't just diet related, but also supplement wise, or even working with their gastroenterologist. But nutrition, can be such a powerful tool. And sometimes just looking at those little things like hydration and ingredients and, properly fueling in terms of nutrient levels and making sure there's no deficiencies can be all that we need to do as dietitians.
All right, Erin, we have a couple ending questions for you. We ask everybody who is on the podcast these 4 questions. And because it's called the Eat More Carbs podcast, of course, we're going to ask you what your favorite carbohydrate is.
I love, as this is very specific, but I love Japanese sweet potatoes. They're a staple in our household. My husband and I eat them like at least once or twice a week. If you haven't tried them, I highly recommend it. Sometimes we'll do like a tahini with maple syrup, like drizzle on it, or we'll make like a chipotle mayo sauce with it. I love potatoes in general, but the Japanese sweet potatoes, if you haven't had them, it's my favorite.
I love to roast them with cinnamon and salt and put a little bit of peanut butter on them.
Yum. Yes, absolutely.
What about your favorite pre-workout fuel?
My favorite pre-workout fuel, I'm pretty much an oatmeal person through and through. Oatmeal with maple syrup, like that with a little bit of salt, is my go-to. It's never failed me, digestive wise or energy wise. So that is my favorite.
I like the salt add.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It enhances that like maple, the robust maple flavor, and just, hits the spot.
What is your favorite post-workout fuel?
Post-workout, I love smoothies, especially in the hot weather right now. But in the winter, I would say like my favorite thing to eat post-workout, if it's especially not like a run or something where I'm like a little bit more nauseous, I'm going to go for like eggs with toast and some sort of fruit. I love mangoes. I like always have to have fruit at the end of my meals for some reason. It's just like my go-to. Or we love pancakes. We're a big pancake family. We make a lot of pancakes, banana, pumpkin. I love, coming home from the gym or something and having pancakes. It's just like a, especially as an adult, having pancakes feels like such a luxury.
I love pancakes. Now I want some so bad. It's like 2:00 in the afternoon, but I mean, I feel like any time is a good time for pancakes.
Yep. You understand.
I got you. And then this seems to be like the hardest question for the podcast, but we're big shoe people here. So what's your favorite pair of kicks?
Favorite pair of kicks? Okay, so my stepdad works for New Balance, so I have to plug that, and that's all I wear now to keep it in the family.
Yeah.
So I've got the New Balance 1080V or something like that. I've been wearing those. I've already gone through, I don't know, 10 or 12 pairs in the past few years. So it's the black and white, 1080V or something, New Balance, and they're very, very comfortable. You'll see a lot of people wearing them. I think they have a men's version as well that are basically the same.
Erin, thank you so much for being on this episode. We so appreciate everything that you have shared today, and hopefully our listeners have taken away a lot of great information too. For anyone who wants to find you, follow you, ask you more questions, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so definitely social media wise, I'm most active on Instagram, Nutrition Rewired, and then my website, nutritionrewired.com. And if people want to get in touch, they can send me a DM on Instagram. I do my best to get to those, or there's a little chat bubble function on my website, and if you send a message there, it goes straight to my email, and I'm always happy to connect with people and answer any questions that they might have. And my podcast is also Nutrition Rewired, and have a lot of great topics on there, always tying in gut health and nutrition.
We will leave all of Erin's information in the podcast show notes. That way you can easily find her, listen to her podcast, and reach out to her if you want to. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.